Today I'm going to share my birth story. This is the birth story for my second child. I've had two, both boys and both home water births. And I'm really sharing this video because I watched a lot of birth videos when I was pregnant with both of my children, and it gave me a lot of encouragement and inspiration, and it was really helpful to me. So I'm going to start at the beginning, which is really while I was growing up, watching my mom have babies at home. My mom had 10 children, all unmedicated, and several at home. And that is definitely the base of my inspiration. I just loved how those births felt, how beautiful and peaceful it was, how I was able to be involved as a daughter, and other family members and friends were able to be involved. I loved our midwife, and it was very impactful for me, and actually has led me to begin getting into birth work, which is really exciting. I'm a registered nurse right now, but I aspire to be a midwife in the future. So that's the way back story. Speeding up, after my first baby, I decided I wanted to use the same midwife, and we were living in the same place, so pretty much the same plan, just the second time around. And I had a few things that I hoped would be different. I wanted to get in the pool a little bit sooner because that was a really powerful pain relief for me. And I wanted to just trust my body more than I did the first time. And we were trying to get pregnant. We planned for our babies to be about 18 months apart. And so, 18 months came around and I wasn't pregnant. But I was still breastfeeding and had just barely gotten my period back. So it really wasn't much of a shock, but I was still disappointed. Finally, I had a period, and the next month I was pregnant. So our babies ended up being 19 and a half months apart. And that was wonderful. Unfortunately, I started bleeding at about almost 6 weeks in, I think. And the bleeding got a little heavier over a few days, and then I passed some kind of clumpy stuff, and it was really, the largest was only about the size of a dime, but it looked like a miscarriage, and it felt like a miscarriage because I had been a lot more nauseous this early pregnancy, even though it was so early, starting at about even a little bit before 4 weeks, I started to get a little bit nauseous, and it had just progressed and progressed and progressed. And after those clumps, I was much, much less nauseous. And so I really thought that this was a miscarriage, just cut and dry. And when I had first started bleeding, I had scheduled a ultrasound through an independent ultrasound provider. Is a doctor from another country who worked out of a mall. But just did great ultrasounds, and the cost was about $20. It wasn't meant to be medically diagnostic or anything, but I knew that they could tell me if I had a healthy baby, and I had that appointment, and so I went at 7 weeks and 2 days, and there was one healthy baby in there, and I was very happy, and it prompted me to do some research because I was so sure that I had miscarried. And I found a lot of research about twins, and that oftentimes you miscarry twins, and that it's possible that actually the majority of twins that are conceived are not actually born as healthy twins, that it's very common to lose one, absorb one, or to lose them later in pregnancy, as my grandmother did. She had naturally conceived twins, and they were stillborn at 6 months. And then my grandpa, her husband, unrelated, but he also, his brother had twins. And so twins definitely run in my family. And so I thought that was kind of fascinating. And I won't know anytime soon. Whether or not that might be the case, but it seemed to me like that might be what happened, and I'm excited for more research to happen in that topic. So moving on from that, it was a very easy, good pregnancy. I was nauseous, but my in-laws bought electrotherapy bracelets, and it essentially stimulates a nerve in your wrist that affects nausea, and that was really effective for me, and it had no side effects since it's just external electric stimulation. And that was just really wonderful because with both of my pregnancies, I have had symptoms of nausea throughout the whole pregnancy. So that was really wonderful. I talked to the midwife, and there were some things that I really wanted to keep the same. With our first water birth, me and my husband were able to be the only ones who touched the baby, to lift that baby out of the water and just hold that baby and have no one else really around doing anything. And that was a wonderful thing that I wanted to have happen again. I really wanted a more serene environment. After having my first baby, once baby comes out, the birth team and anyone else there tends to get really excited, and I just wanted everything to stay really calm, particularly because with my first baby, my placenta took about half an hour to be birthed, and generally you want it to happen a little bit quicker than that. And I think part of the reason it took so long is because I had kind of that increased stress level, because everyone was kind of hovering after a little bit about baby. My mother-in-law came downstairs, and just the changes can kind of make your body shut down in that way, because that same environment you want to facilitate the best birth is also the environment you want to birth your placenta. You need to feel very safe on a very primal, deep, unconscious level. And so I wanted to just have a little more serenity after the birth, so that hopefully my placenta would just come that much more quickly. All of my vitals looked great going into the later stages of my pregnancy. Because of the nausea, I had lost some weight during the first half of my pregnancy, but I was able to gain it back, plus 25 pounds during the second half of my pregnancy, so I was within the normal range for really everything. I denied having Doppler ultrasounds to check heart rate at my postnatal or my prenatal appointments, just because I don't feel like there's quite enough research on the long-term effects of consistent use of Doppler, but I did want the midwife to do all the regular checks while I was in labor to check for fetal distress. So that was the plan, and I kept feeling like I was gonna have this baby at night. When I would visualize it, I tried to do a lot of positive visualization. I wanted to have a very peaceful birth, and I was really excited. My husband was really on board. With the first baby, he was nervous because his background is not a home birth background. He was born in a hospital, as were all of his siblings and everyone that he knew of. So it was a little bit new for him, but he really loved it as a bonding experience, and also just for the spiritual aspect of it. He's a very sensitive person that way, and he appreciated that. He appreciated just that holistic aspect of it, that we were able to be together and be close and not have the interruptions and interventions and just general, legally motivated meddling that happens in hospitals. So he was excited, and that just made me really happy, and it was just really positive going into labor. Because with my first baby, my water had broke as the first sign of labor. I really didn't even know what it felt like to slowly go into labor. And so I lost my mucus plug at 38 weeks, 5 days. And there was a tiny tinge of brown, and I just knew that was blood. And I'm a medical professional, I'm a registered nurse, so I've seen blood, but it was really a small amount. But I really just knew that it wasn't anything else, that mucus plug should be clear if that wasn't blood. And it was a little bit, just like I said, the tiniest smudge, and it was brown. But I really just felt like that was a sign the baby was coming, because I just knew that was blood. And I told the midwife, and she trusted me, which I'm thankful for. She was like, well, that's good. If it's blood, it means that things are happening. So I'll be ready, and just, give me a call. She wanted me to keep her very updated, because my first baby had come much quicker than most first babies go. It wasn't a precipitous labor, but she thought that I would have a precipitous labor, which is technically defined as under 3 hours. And she was suspicious that was going to be me, just because my first labor had been about 4 or 5 hours of active labor. And she just was concerned about that. And so for most women, she would say you want to have contractions that are about a minute long, 5 minutes apart or less, for an hour before calling. But for me, she just said, call me as soon as you think you might be in labor, because she lived an hour away and she didn't want to miss it. So fast forward, we lost the mucus plug, and the next day, my husband was about done with work, driving home, and he works about an hour away. And my mother and some of my sisters, who I was really hopeful would be here before I had the baby, were also on their way driving to the state where I live. And they were coming from another state, so they were several hours away, but they were on their way. And I started to have some cramps. And I was packaging some freeze-dried strawberries, and just, in that zone doing that, and these cramps kept coming. And I was talking to my husband on the phone while he was driving, and I think it was like the second time I kind of mentioned, like, oh, cramping again. And he was like, do you think you're in labor? And I was like, no, because I cramp pretty often. And he said, oh, but it's been a couple times just during this conversation. And I think he might have suggested I time it. So I started paying attention, and sure enough, they were about 15 minutes apart, pretty consistently. And they were also very low down in my pelvis, which the midwife had said Braxton Hicks are oftentimes higher. You might feel your uterus tight. But my uterus wasn't tight, but it was just low, achy, a little more like period cramping. And so it definitely got me thinking, maybe this is labor. But it was hardly painful at all, like less painful than Braxton Hicks that I'd had in the past. And so, I was still unsure. But after about 8 to 10 of those contractions, I shot the midwife a text, and I said, I'm having just regular low cramping. I don't know if it means anything yet, but I just wanted to let you know. And she responded and said she was out shopping with her daughter, and they were a little far away from her home, and for her to be ready. And so she was going to wrap up and go home, just in case this progressed into something more quickly. And so she did that. And I also texted my mom, and I said, hey, don't stop for dinner, because I think I'm going into labor. And everyone was pretty excited, and those aches just kept going. And my husband got home from work, and he was setting up our birth space this whole time. He blew up the pool, and he just got the couch positioned, and just a few things set up the way that we wanted for me to have this baby. And meanwhile, I was just having these soft cramps, and I really wanted to go eat, because my first pregnancy, when I went into labor, I was not nourished, I was not hydrated, and I was not rested appropriately. And so I think maybe I had some sort of complex PTSD from that, because I was like, we have to eat. And so we were going to go out to eat, but first we wanted to get everything all set up at home, and I wanted to also leave the house to go out to eat, because I wanted to kind of forget that I was in labor. I wanted to just just pretend it wasn't happening, and just kind of enjoy that denial phase. So by the time we got everything ready and I had my shoes on and was walking out the door, I had the first contraction that I think was the first one that I kind of had to focus through. And I just told my husband, I'm like, no, like, this isn't gonna happen. I need to stay here, but you go, it'll take 10 minutes. You go get me something to eat and just bring it back here. So he left, and I called my best friend, and she gave me some mindfulness exercises to do. And so I just relaxed until my husband got back. I ate a lot of food. It was deli food, which I do not recommend for reasons which will come up later. And my contractions just started to get stronger over the next couple of hours. And I started managing them by laying down on the carpet near our restroom. And we just had the lights very low, and I had some worship music playing very loudly just so I could focus on that. And I just laid on my side, and my husband just sat next to me and just had his arm on me and was just talking to me. And I had a peanut birth ball between my knees, and I felt like that was a good position for my hips. My body definitely felt like my contractions were able to do what they were supposed to do in that position, so I was comfortable. And we just did that for I think 2 hours or so. And one of my in-laws came down in the other room where the birth pool was set up and filled it with warm water. And once that was ready, I went out to get in. And just as I went out to get in, the midwife and her assistant showed up and began setting up all their stuff. And then probably 10 minutes later, my mom and my sisters walked in, and there was a lot of excitement there. I know they were trying to be quiet, but I just stopped having contractions. And I just know that disruption is what made my brain just tell my body, like, oh, wait, like, there's something wrong. We don't want to drop this baby yet. Like, let's make sure everything's all peaceful and calm first. And this was probably 10 p.m. But I just went back in the bathroom and laid down with my husband and just got in that same position I was before. And in about 45 minutes, things had returned to the previous intensity. But that break was a little bit discouraging for me, because for your labor to completely stop, I just thought, I must not be as far along as I thought I was in labor. Like, this must be pretty early. But things kept going, and once the contractions got going strongly again, I just went through a few in that position, and then I came out and I got in the water, and they stayed strong, and I was able to relax in the tub, and that was great. When midnight came, someone mentioned that it was now past midnight. And I was really excited because it was the first of the month, and that was the day that I kind of wanted my baby born. And there was a shift in my body where suddenly my contractions just got stronger. And it just really testifies to the psychological component of birth, that I didn't even know that my desire to have my baby on the first of the month was holding back my labor. Because as soon as I knew that it was the first, my body just relaxed, and there was just a stress release where I just was excited and ready, and my body responded, and my contractions got more intense. And at that point, I started using combs to squeeze with the tines in my palm, and I would just squeeze during contractions, and that's based on the gate control theory of pain, and I found it very effective for me. So I would recommend trying that because it's cheap. Just get a couple combs. And so I would do that. And I also had my sister, who was acting as my doula, and my husband get a bucket of ice and some ice packs and just rub my body with the ice on my chest, on my back, on my belly during the height of a contraction. And that also just gave my brain some other stimulation to focus on other than the pain that really decreased my perception of that pain. So I recommend trying that. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but that worked for me. And I just kept going, and I ended up throwing up. Going between the pool and sitting on the toilet, I threw up a couple times, and all that deli food just was gone. And I talked to the midwife afterwards, and she told me, she's like, I saw that plate of half-eaten food, and I just hope that wasn't you, because you've been nauseous your whole pregnancy, and even for women that aren't nauseous their whole pregnancy, throwing up during labor is common. So it's really good to eat things like yogurt or kefir or honey, just slightly lighter things that are gonna be okay coming up, because they might, and also things that are easy to digest, so that if you do throw up, you still might get some of that nourishment before you throw up. So just, pro tip, don't do what I did. Don't eat a bunch of deli food when you're in early labor. But at about 1:30, I had been throwing up. These contractions had been really intense for more than an hour. And I just said, okay, like, I'm done. Can I quit now? Can we stop? And I was somewhat joking, but the midwife just said, nope, you can't. The only way out is through, but you're doing great. You can do this. And I just internally rolled my eyes, because, it's not the most helpful. Obviously, there's nothing else they can say, but it's easy to be irritated when you're in labor. And I just kept going, and I felt like my body wanted to push very soon after that. And for about 20 minutes, I felt that fetal ejection reflex get stronger. And it's just such a cool feeling to just feel your body like try to bear down. And I remember that feeling from my first baby, and it meant that I was almost at the end. But I felt like baby was stuck, like baby was not descending the way that I felt like baby should, based on how strongly my body was trying to push that baby out. And I felt like my water was holding that baby back. And so I told the midwife, I want you to break my water. And she argued with me a little bit. Well, I shouldn't say argued, but she questioned that, just because she very rarely breaks waters. And there's risks associated with breaking waters, and it's just an intervention that's usually completely unnecessary. But for me personally, I just knew that my baby was being held back and my water hadn't broken. I knew that I was ready to birth this baby, and so I wanted my water broken. And another reason why I wanted the water broken is because I feel like the normal bacteria and just general microbiome of the vagina is important for babies to be exposed to as they come out. If you're a healthy person, obviously there are certain conditions that make that less healthy for the baby. But I felt like for me and for my baby, that was what was most healthy for the baby, based on the research I had done on C-sections and how that affects allergies, and just that baby not getting the cultures that they are supposed to have naturally. And so I wanted the water broken, and I felt like baby was stuck, and baby was descending slowly, and my body was I was trying to just breathe and let my body physiologically push. And I started doing my own internal exams, and I could feel the water, and the midwife had done a quick check, and she just said that the water bag was too tightly pressed against baby's head, that she couldn't break it, because there was no space essentially between baby's head and the membrane to get a grip on it, or to use her hook to break it without potentially like hurting the baby. And so I just kept checking on my own, because baby's head was now at a point where I could feel baby's head when I felt just a couple centimeters up, a few centimeters. It was a little bit of a reach, but also very clear, and that was just good for me to feel my progress as I was pushing. And I could feel that membrane, the water bag, and soon enough I felt a bubble of amniotic fluid come between the membrane and baby's head, and I was able to grip that membrane, and I was able to tear it open. and I just felt the waters just rush out, and baby's head just dropped down into my pelvis. And the next push, baby came out, head, body, everything at once. And it was less than a minute after I manually ruptured the membranes that baby was born. And I reached down to pull him up on my chest, and he wasn't there. And I turned around, and the midwife's assistant was holding the baby, like, here you go, and just put him on my chest, and I was able to hold him. And my husband was also there right next to the pool and just helped me and helped both of us, and we just sat there, and he was just beautiful. There's really nothing that can describe that moment of being able to hold your baby outside. Well, I guess not everyone's outside the pool, outside the water, but I was in the water. But just holding your baby and just being done with labor and having that new person, you know, that sweet spirit just so close to you that you felt so bonded to for a long time, but haven't truly been able to see and touch with your hands. And just to be able to do that, it's priceless. And the hormones that your body creates in that time are also just designed for ultimate bonding. You know, your levels of oxytocin really are never higher than that at any other time in your life other than having a baby. And that was just wonderful. And the midwife very quickly kind of was a little concerned and was like, hey, like, I need you to rub your baby. I need you to stimulate him more. She's like, we really need to get him to cry. Because I was kind of rubbing him. I was kind of doing a little bit. I just really felt like he was fine. I felt like I could kind of see that he was breathing through his nose and that he was just really relaxed, as a lot of water-birthed babies are, just because it's a more peaceful way to be born. A lot of the time, I think they just don't even really realize they've been born, especially when they're put right on mom's chest. And but she was concerned, and the assistant was concerned, and so I kind of like moved him away from my chest, and I bothered him until he got mad and started to cry a little bit. And I know that that's what they wanted, and I brought him back, but he seemed unhappy from that. And in hindsight, I definitely wish that I had trusted my instincts, just because I knew he was fine. I knew he was breathing, and just told them, like, hey, just give it a few more seconds, because really it's okay to wait about 30 seconds before you start being crazy vigorous with all the stimulation. And at the time, I just trusted them, but in hindsight, I just feel like him getting pulled away from me and rubbed and just disturbed made it harder for him to breastfeed, and just was not the kind of introduction to the world that I wish I could have given him, that I know I could have if I just trusted my instincts. While we're on the topic of things I wish were different, there's definitely a miscommunication between the midwife and the assistant. The assistant was not at my prenatal appointments, and she didn't get the memo that I wanted to catch my baby, and so she was just right there and just whoop, pulled him up before I could even get my hands on him, and that is okay. But if you have birth wishes like that, make sure that everybody who's at the birth knows. Maybe make sure that if there is an assistant who's not at your prenatals, if you have wishes like that, make sure that the midwife is communicating that to her assistant, because that assistant was very experienced, was a lot like a midwife, and was very used to just jumping in and doing her thing. But as a lot of new midwives are, they're just a little more hands-on than maybe they need to be. And so I do wish that she had just been away and not been like hovering over me, ready to snatch my baby when he came out. But he came out and he ended up right on me, and I know it wasn't disruptive to him at all. So overall, I want to stress that I'm just so thankful for the opportunity to have a healthy baby and the unmedicated home birth that I wanted. I was able to hold him. I was able to get him to latch sitting in the tub, the birth pool. I was able to pass my placenta about 10 minutes after baby was born in that pool. My blood loss was really minimal. I was able to just get in bed and lay down. I had no tearing. They did the newborn exam right next to me, and baby looked great. He weighed 7 pounds, almost 21 inches long. And the midwife and her assistant cleaned up everything, and everyone left. And I was able to also share this experience of birthing my baby with my mom and my sisters, because they all arrived in time. And that was a wonderful thing, because my sisters hadn't had a baby, but they were able to see that home birth. And it was not as peaceful as perhaps I envisioned, especially on my part. I was hoping that I would be a little quieter, but I definitely was not. I was quite loud. But it's okay. You know, that's what my body needed to do to be okay with what was happening. And maybe in the future that might change, but that's how my birth was. And I'm just so thankful for a healthy baby. And it was so worth it. Just laying down in bed after everyone left, being able to feed my baby and cuddle with that baby next to me and my husband, and go back to sleep in and wake up and just know that, you know, we were able to be present and enjoy that experience and the next day, and not have all the monitoring and not have any remnants of side effects of drugs in our system, no spinal headache, no drowsiness from just all the stuff that can end up in your body that's artificial, that oftentimes happens when you go to a hospital. To not have any of that and just feel so wonderful afterwards, it was amazing. And I'm just really thankful that I had that experience, and I'm grateful I was able to share it with you. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. I'll try to answer any questions I can. This is the first video I've ever done on YouTube, so yeah, I just will definitely read the comments and try to be helpful, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you.